we want to break down the Knicks cap situation, what they can and cannot do during the season, when they can add a veteran free agent, and what things look like now. So, Yossi, the Knicks obviously going in this season with less than 15 players on the roster. It appears so, at least. And so, what does that mean for them as far as having to get up to 15 or being able to dip below? Like, where do they stand there coming into the year?
Well, thanks for having me on again, Ian. I always love being here. Yeah, so now Landry Shamet, Mohamed Diawara, they were on training camp deals. They weren't waived, so now they just automatically become standard non-guaranteed contracts. So Knicks are going into the season with 14 players, including them on their respective minimums. And that puts the Knicks just about $148,000 below the hard cap. So, as things stand now, if they stick with this same roster for the entire season, they can't add a 15th player until like April, like really like the end of the season.
Hmm.
They can bring somebody on a rest of season contract. They could, in the meantime, uh, at one point they will be able to, if they want, sign someone to a 10-day contract, but just one. And then that would cut their apron space so low that they probably can't sign a permanent 15th player until maybe one of the last few days of the season.
Hmm.
I think the Knicks will probably, if they do have some marginal moves that they want to make, they'll probably make a trade so they could open up the flexibility needed to do that. Uh, as we've been discussing over the past month, we were speculating maybe it would be Pacome Daddier or Tyler Kolek. But now that we're into the season, it could be other players later on, starting in around December or January. It could be maybe one of the minimum guys that they just recently signed. If Clarkson or Shamid, for example, maybe they're not quite working out as they hope, they could trade one of them, open up another $2.3 million, and now you have enough space to sign as many, really like as try out many different 10-day guys, add a new 14th, 15th guy. So they'll have options. I anticipate they'll probably do something on the margins to open up some flexibility so they could bring fill out their end of the bench as we get closer to the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting that they're going to have to wait that long. Last year they brought in PJ Tucker earlier than April, obviously last season, and they valued his contributions, but it was kind of a similar scenario with sneaking him under the second apron. So they'll have that ability as things stand now, as Yossi told you, late in the season, but maybe they make a trade to free up some money. The backup point guard spot, it's going to be interesting to me. Is it Kolek? Is it a combination of McBride and Clarkson? How does that shake out? Do they do, even Josh Hart there? Is it kind of by committee? I know Spencer Dinwiddie got waived by Charlotte, and I don't think it would be Spencer Dinwiddie. Obviously, they would need to trade somebody to be able to add him on, but I haven't heard much there with the Knicks and Dinwiddie, just for whatever that's worth. But I am looking closely at that backup point guard spot. And then Yossi, during the season here, Knicks, Mitchell Robinson, he's entering free agency. Can they discuss an extension during the season?
So I just want to add about that what you just talked about with Dinwiddie. So
Mhm.
the Knicks, since they're over the first apron, they wouldn't be able to sign most players making the mid-level or more out of buyout. So Dinwiddie wouldn't count for that. He was making the minimum. But just an interesting note, yeah, they could add him at any point if any of the if once a player who's making the mid-level or more gets waived mid-season, the Knicks wouldn't be able to add that guy. As far as Mitchell Robinson, he is extension eligible throughout the season. I'm sure the Knicks and him were discussing numbers throughout the offseason, but probably weren't very close. And at the same time, now we're at the point where we're within 6 months of the trade deadline. Maybe the Knicks want to keep that option open if just in case I think Mitchell Robinson, they'd like to keep him. He was really impactful for them once he came back. But what if he gets like another big injury? Maybe they want to keep that option open in case they do need to trade him for a healthy body if it comes to that. So if they give him an extension, like the one of the if they give him like the maximum they could give him or pretty close to it, they can't trade him for the rest of the season since that 6 months trade restriction would extend past the trade deadline. They could give him something a little smaller on the years and dollar amount, but maybe he might not be wanting to accept that. He might want to try to wait out to get something a little more. So, either way, there is time. They can negotiate an extension all the way up until the end of the regular season. So, I would guess that assuming he plays well for them, he's healthy, and he sticks past the trade deadline, I could see both sides agreeing to an extension short sometime after that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Last time we were here with Robinson and the Knicks, they didn't get close to a common number, common grounds when they talked extension during the season that he was entering free agency. If I'm Robinson, I'm looking at the cap space situation for this coming summer. And Yossi, correct me if I'm wrong. It's going to be much stronger this coming summer than it was last summer. So I might kind of bet on myself there and see what interest that could garner. But we're a long way from there, right? We still have to see if Mitchell Robinson is playing in the opener and how he does during the season. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic there with Robinson. And then another extension that the Knicks have signed, Mikal Bridges, the extension that he agreed to. I believe it was the end of January, start of August. I think it was 6 million less than his max, Yossi. And I'm just curious, as somebody who knows the CBA so well, knows these contracts so well, what was your initial reaction to that number, that extension?
I thought even the full amount he could have gotten, that 156 was I thought that was pretty favorable to the Knicks. I think he's probably worth a little more than that. I feel like his production's a little marginalized being a third and fourth option on the Knicks versus when he was a higher option on the Nets and Suns. But as far as his impact goes, especially in the playoffs, I think if he hit the open market, there's a possibility he could have gotten a little more. I don't know how much more. So I really like that contract for the Knicks. And it is the fact that they were able to get him on even a little bit less than his maximum. That's just great negotiation on their part. And I think that's gonna, in the long term, if they need to make some changes and that might involve him, I think that's a very tradable contract. I think it's kind of in line with the contract he's in now. I feel like as long as he continues to play at this level he is, that would be a very appealing contract to interested teams out there.
And Miles McBride, maybe you could clarify this for me. I thought he's extension eligible at the end of December, the 2 year anniversary of when he signed the deal. I've seen other dates elsewhere. I think somebody had him as this today was the last day he could sign the extension. Do you know what the date is there for him?
So you're right about that. Since he did a 3 year extension, the anniversary date in December, end of December, that would be the 2 year anniversary date would be the day he becomes extension eligible. However, he does still have an additional year left on his contract. So today's actually the deadline for players with multiple years left on their contract to extend, but he's not eligible yet since
Hmm.
we haven't hit the anniversary. So he will become eligible as soon as this offseason, July 6th, as soon as the moratorium ends.
Hmm.
And he will be able, the Knicks will be able to pay him whatever his market value is. He does make a pretty low salary, that around $4 million a year, but just because it's that low, they could still bring his starting number high enough where they could match really any potential offer out there for him. I would think that his contract ending coincides with Towns' player option. Towns technically could extend today. The deadline for him to extend is tonight. I don't anticipate that will get done, but that could be something. One, it is time to revisit it. Maybe he declines his player option, that $60 million amount, I think. Does he want it? Maybe take something a little less just as with Brunson and Mikal Bridges, everyone's been taking a little bit less. That could help subsidize the cost of a potential raise for Miles McBride. So that's just something I'm keeping an eye. I feel like those two things might be somewhat related, and probably something we hear more about next offseason.
I guess my question, Yossi, you led me to my next one is can the Knicks, given where they are financially, could they, extend Miles McBride and sign Mr. Robinson to a competitive number and still be under the second apron, or would it be really difficult for them to be under that second apron if you were going to try to bring both of those guys back?
So next season, I'm fully expecting the Knicks to be above the second apron. That's assuming they extend Mitchell Robinson. That's going to put them above it. Uh, and then the following season, I can't really project after that, but I would still probably, to be safe, anticipate they'll remain over the second apron. Maybe if they are able to pull off what I'm proposing, if let's say Towns would agree to something where he, instead of making 60 million, maybe he makes like 50 million a year. So you're saving like 10 million there. And then maybe with that money, you're paying McBride. It's hard to really project this because we don't know what the numbers are going to be then. I would guess though the next 2 years at least, the Knicks are probably going to be over the second apron, and that the only way that they get below it is if they sacrifice a key player, one of their top eight, nine highest paid guys. But it's not a problem. They're prepared for this. I think they're willing to spend. I don't think money is really an object. The second apron thing is more so you want to strategize it where you don't have your first round pick in the future fall at the end of the first round. So they could be over the second apron for 2 straight years while avoiding that. Uh, so really, it's just about the money because when you're in the second apron, then you are also paying a very high luxury tax penalty. And after next season, they'll be in the repeater tax. But I don't think money's really an issue. They're the second or third most valuable team in the league. They're already shown a willingness to spend a lot of money this year, as much as they possibly could. So I think as long as the team remains a title contender, the second apron won't be a concern, and the tax penalties also really won't factor in.
It's interesting because, James Dolan, historically, people who work there for him always say that he's willing to put the resources forth for whatever you need. And so you're getting to a place where the tax is escalated. I know that he spent a lot on, well, coaching. He's got Tom Thibodeau getting 30 plus $1 million on that extension to not work. And then you got big front office. So I know he's put a lot of resources into the team. I would assume that there's no number he wouldn't go to if this team was competing for a championship. But that second apron, it certainly puts a little bit of a wrinkle on things, Yossi. And one other thing is, how does it impact you from a flexibility standpoint? Because we're Nick's first apron, they've been there for a while. Once they get to that second apron, what are the things that they cannot do?
So right now they're in between the aprons where they can't really increase their payroll in the trade. They could only take back the same dollar amount, they or less. They could still aggregate players, but once they're over the second apron, they lose the ability to aggregate players. Um, when they did the Towns trade, they were able to sign and trade some of their free agents to help inflate the outgoing amount needed to match for Towns' amount. That wouldn't be allowed. You could still sign and trade players, but not in the sense of where you're bringing back a player under contract. You can sign and trade a player, but just get back like picks and cash. That's basically it. They wouldn't be able to send out cash in a trade. So that could be a problem when it comes to maybe the draft. If they wanted to try to buy a second round pick, that would option would be eliminated. And this year, they used the tax pyramid level on Gershon Yabusele. They were able to use that because they're below the second apron. They wouldn't have any mid-level exception if they're over the second apron. So the only way they could really increase their payroll would be by re-signing or extending their own players, um, signing rookies that they drafted, or signing minimum players. That's it.
Yeah.
So
So
they have to be prepared for that, but they already done the work. They've got their core. They could use some more young players in the system, but they could make that happen still. But either way, they're well equipped for whatever is going to come with the second apron.
We're talking about the future off seasons, maybe this coming off season included, to talk about Giannis. Unless the Bucks have a really good season and it's clear that they can contend with Giannis, I think if they get off to a shaky start or they don't have a great year, the conversations about Giannis are just going to continue. And we know he's been linked to the Knicks for good reason. I've said it. I think so many hurdles have to fall in place for that to become remotely a reality for many different reasons. But Yossi, you touched on that recently. I believe that you were writing on the third apron about that possibility, and you were talking about other teams that could be suitors. Where do you see the Knicks as far as in the hierarchy of teams that have the trade ammo to make that kind of a deal?
I think they're pretty not high in the hierarchy.
Mm,
They, I think their window to realistically trade for Giannis went away, closed when they traded instead for Mikal Bridges, trading all their first round picks for him, and then trading for Karl Anthony Towns, trading Randall, Dante DiVincenzo, another first round pick over a year ago, and I started doing Third Apron, and I made some mock off-season videos. I did one on the Knicks after they lost to the Pacers in the 2024 playoffs about they can my ideal Giannis trade package, which was basically all the stuff that they traded for Bridges and Towns. But that was also assuming maybe they also re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein, which didn't happen. So now I don't think they really have a top five offer, or really maybe even a top 10 offer to interest the Bucks. I wrote about now how they technically do still kind of have a window because since they're below the first apron, below the second apron, they could still aggregate guys. And it's going to probably take multiple starters at least. And it will probably take something like maybe they have to trade both Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and send them to teams where they are sending out multiple draft picks and rerouting those to the Bucks to satisfy them. I think there's just too many moving parts, too much what ifs. And then if you look at the Knicks side, is it really worth it to gut this top eight, this or their top six starters that they've got? I think that's a pretty valid concern now. Let's say you have to trade Towns and OG Anunoby. So then you're basically Brunson, Mikal, Giannis. Is this team really equipped for Giannis? I think when they had Isaiah Hartenstein, I think it would have been a much better fit in the front court. I can't say I like the idea of him being paired up with Mitchell Robinson full time. So I think there's also some valid issues on the Knicks end of how the roster is going to look after, and it's going to be very hard for them to reorient the roster around Giannis when they're going to be over the second apron in future years. It's going to be very hard to make the trades necessary. So that's my thing on it. I would be pretty surprised, or very surprised, if the Knicks are able to acquire Giannis, even if they are willing to give up some of the combination of guys I mentioned.
Yossi, always appreciate your insights and your analysis of the cap situation. You got to check out Yossi on the third apron. He writes, he does video content. He's all over the cap situation across the league. So please keep an eye on him there. He does a great job. Yossi, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me on, Ian.